The first time you see your sister in 10 years, you shoot her. It happens in Hue during the Tet Offensive, in a smoke-filled building where nobody can tell where the last burst of gunfire came from. Your squad has slipped in through the side. Somewhere ahead, a shape moves across the corridor. You see motion. You see danger. You fire. The figure drops. Then a woman screams a name almost nobody uses for you anymore. Your childhood name. And suddenly the war stops being something happening around you. It becomes personal. The wounded figure is wearing a civilian medical armband. When she turns, you see a small scar beside one eyebrow. You know that scar. You caused it when you were 6 years old and threw a stone that went somewhere it wasn't supposed to. Han, your older sister. The bullet has gone through her upper arm and shoulder. There is a lot of blood, but she is alive. For a few seconds, she only stares at you. Then recognition reaches her face. 10 years apart, and the first thing she notices is that you've grown. You start laughing, then crying, then working desperately to stop the bleeding. But to understand how you ended up shooting your own sister in a battle for the city where you were born, you have to go back 4 years. Back to Hanoi. Back to a white movie screen hanging in the dark. Back to 1964, when you are 18 years old and still believe your family's history is simple. Your name is Tranjuk Lam. You live with your mother, Thu, in 2 rooms behind a cooperative repair shop in Hanoi. The shop fixes things. You don't. Your job is with a traveling cinema crew. You haul film reels from place to place, paint signs by hand, set up equipment, and help a 54-year-old projectionist named Bao bring movies to factories, schools, and villages. Most people love the movie itself. You love the moment before it starts. A sheet has been stretched up to serve as the screen. People gather in the dark. Children whisper. Adults settle down. The projector hasn't started yet. For a few seconds, there is nothing on the screen, just possibility. You draw whenever you can, and you dream about studying art one day. Your mother tells you that's not a serious plan. Then she quietly saves almost every drawing you throw away. That's Thu, practical in what she says, sentimental in what she hides. And she has hidden more from you than you know. There are supposed to be 4 people in your family. Instead, there are 2 in Hanoi and 2 in the south. You were 8 years old in 1954, when the Geneva settlement brought the war against France to an end and temporarily divided Vietnam near the 17th parallel. What you remember from that year comes in pieces. Heat, crowds, the confusion of moving north. Your mother's hand locked around your wrist. Your sister Han crying beside the road. Your father holding her. Then separation. Han remained in the south. So did your father, Tran Van Hoy, a schoolteacher near Hoi. Your mother has spent 10 years giving you one explanation. He stayed because he wanted to. Your grandmother was sick, she says, but that wasn't the whole reason. According to Thu, your father believed life would be better in the south. She wasn't going to sit around waiting for a man who had already made his decision. You grew up angry at him because of that story. Han is 21 now. You've heard that she became a nurse. Your father is still teaching. Neither of them ever came north. Whenever you ask why, your mother suddenly finds something else to do. Bao, the projectionist, is easier to talk to. He's missing the tip of a finger from the war against the French, but he almost never tells stories about fighting. Young men around you sometimes talk as if the next war will be cleaner and easier. Bao never joins in. Once, while feeding film through the projector, he tells you that every generation makes the same mistake. It assumes the enemy will behave exactly the way it expects. You remember that. You don't understand it yet. Then August 1964 arrives. 2 American destroyer incidents in the Gulf of Tonkin suddenly become part of everyday conversation. On August 10th, North Vietnamese patrol boats clash with the USS Maddox. A second attack is reported on August 4th, although what happened that night later becomes deeply disputed. In Washington, the incidents helped lead to the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution and a major expansion of American military involvement in Southeast Asia. In Hanoi, the change is immediate. More warnings, more mobilization, air defense drills, conversations that used to be about work, food, school, family, or films now keep circling back to war. Then, in 1965, Operation Rolling Thunder begins. American aircraft carry out sustained bombing against North Vietnam, while American ground combat forces enter South Vietnam in growing numbers. One afternoon, your cinema crew is setting up an outdoor show when the sirens begin. Explosions hit a transportation area several kilometers away. By the time you return to the screen, dust has settled across the white cloth. Bao looks at it, then starts folding it. No film tonight. The audience, he says, has already been shown enough. Recruitment accelerates, and you volunteer for the People's Army of Vietnam. Your reasons are real, but they are not all the same. You believe Vietnam should be reunified. You believe foreign military power should not decide the country's future. You believe some of what you're being told about national independence and resistance, but that's not the whole story. You also want to go south. You want Hue. You want your sister. And whether you admit it or not, you want your father. When you tell Thu you've joined, she goes completely still. You tell yourself that your father made his choice years ago. Then, for the first time, you ask your mother something more specific. Did he actually say that? Did he really tell her he was choosing the South over you? Thu doesn't answer. She looks away. That tiny silence changes everything. Not enough to give you the truth, just enough to make you realize there may be one. The night before you leave, you sit beside Bao while he repairs a damaged reel. He shows you where the film has torn. Most people, he says, imagine fixing a reel is simple. Cut away the ruined frames, reconnect the film, and keep going. But that's not really what happens. Remove even a few frames and the rhythm changes. The image before the cut means something slightly different. So does the image after it. A missing piece can alter the whole sequence. You don't know why the lesson stays with you. At the train station, Thu holds you tightly. Then she says something even stranger. If you meet your father, hear him out before deciding what kind of man he is. The train starts moving before you can make her explain. Army training replaces cinema almost overnight. Marching, weapons, camouflage, political instruction, first aid, fieldcraft. You learn to travel at night, scatter when aircraft appear, sleep badly, eat quickly, and carry loads that once would have seemed impossible. Then your old habit of drawing becomes useful. An officer notices a sketch you've made of the training area. Soon you're copying route diagrams, marking terrain, and drawing roads, streams, and positions after patrols. You're still an infantryman, but sometimes the men planning a movement want your pencil as much as your rifle. Your platoon commander is Lieutenant Kang, 27 years old, a former mathematics teacher. Kang approaches war like an equation. He always seems convinced that if everyone had enough information, there would be one correct answer. Your closest friend is Phuc. He's 24, married, and already a father. His daughter was born while he was away training. He has never held her. He carries a photograph of her, but after you joke that all babies look alike, he refuses to show it to you. By late 1966, your unit begins moving south. The journey changes your understanding of war. From far away, people talk about battles. On the trail, you learn that a war can be won or lost by things nobody puts in heroic speeches. Rice, medicine, fuel, truck parts, bridges, road repairs, ammunition. A rifle at the front means nothing if the ammunition never gets there. A soldier means very little if malaria takes him out before he reaches the fighting. Rain destroys roads, mud swallows wheels, leeches work under clothing. Air attacks leave craters where supply routes existed hours earlier. After one strike destroys a truck ahead of your column, Phuc looks at the wreckage and says, "At least the aircraft missed your group." Kang disagrees. "They didn't miss the war. That truck was carrying something somebody else was waiting for. Destroying it means some unit farther south will now fight without whatever was inside." By late 1967, your unit reaches northern South Vietnam. The rumors begin. Something big is coming, much bigger than the operations you've seen before. Tet, you're told attacks will take place across South Vietnam against cities, bases, provincial centers, and government positions. Political officers talk about a general offensive and uprising. The expectation is that the attacks may trigger a broader revolt and badly damage, perhaps even break, the South Vietnamese government. Then you hear where you're going. For several nights you barely sleep. Eventually Phuc asks what is wrong. You tell him your family lives there. Han, your father. You tell him the version of the story you've believed since childhood. Your father stayed, your mother left, and he never came after you. Phuc listens. Then, without saying much, he finally takes out the picture of his daughter. You ask why he's showing you now. Because family, he tells you, has a way of destroying everybody's good judgment. At the end of January 1968, the Tet Offensive begins. North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces attack across South Vietnam. Cities, provincial capitals, towns, military positions. Hue becomes one of the largest and fiercest battles. Communist forces capture most of the city and hold major parts of it for weeks. You enter before dawn. This is the place you have spent years imagining. But memory is useless. The Hue you remember is gone beneath smoke. Broken walls, barricades, gunfire, confusion, and frightened civilians. Your platoon moves through damaged neighborhoods where wounded people and families shelter wherever they can, and you keep looking at faces. It is ridiculous. There are thousands upon thousands of people in the city. Still, some part of you expects your sister to walk around a corner. 3 days later, she almost does. Your squad is moving through a narrow lane when rounds strike a wall ahead. Nobody is sure where the fire came from. You enter a damaged building from another side. Smoke hangs in the corridor. A figure moves. You shoot. And your entire childhood lands on the floor. Han survives the shot. Once you've bandaged her, you help move her to a lower room where civilians have taken shelter. She keeps staring at you. Then she points out the obvious. You shot your own sister. You tell her you know. She says it again, as if repetition might somehow make it less absurd. Then she starts laughing. Shock, probably. It hurts her shoulder, so the laughter turns into a grimace. Phuc watches the two of you. Family, he reminds you. You ask about your father. Alive, she says. Just hearing that word hits you harder than you expected. Then you ask the question you've carried since you were 8. Why did he stay? Han's face changes. She doesn't understand what you mean. Your father, she says, did not choose her over you. And there, in a basement during one of the bloodiest battles of the war, the story your mother gave you begins to fall apart. Han remembers 1954 differently. Your grandmother really was seriously ill. Your father did not want to leave her immediately. He expected that movement across what was supposed to be a temporary division would remain possible. He wanted Thu to wait. Thu was afraid that if she waited, she might lose her chance to reach the north. So she left with you. Your father had not agreed to it. Han stayed behind because she refused to leave your sick grandmother. You tell her she's lying. Han lifts her wounded arm a fraction. She has just been shot by her younger brother in the middle of a battle. She is in no mood, she says, to make the day worse by creating fake family drama. An explosion shakes the building. Then the army orders your unit forward. You want to remain with her. Han tells you not to. You've already wounded her once. She doesn't need you turning the room into a military position because you suddenly feel guilty. So you leave. You leave your sister for the second time in your life. The difference is that this time you will remember every second of it. Hue grinds your platoon down. Men disappear from roll call. Phuc survives. Lieutenant Kang is wounded. And the uprising you were told to expect does not happen on anything close to the promised scale. Then your father finds you. Tran Van Hoy comes to a temporary aid area because he has heard that a nurse matching Han's description has been wounded. You don't recognize him at first. He recognizes you. He says your name. He is 53 now, his hair nearly white. He looks at your face, then tells you that you have your mother's eyes. You have imagined this meeting for years. In those imaginary versions, you scream at him. Instead, you ask one question. Did Thu take you north without his agreement? He closes his eyes. Yes. Then why didn't he come after you? He says he tried. At first, the separation had seemed temporary. Then the division hardened. Travel became harder. Communication became unreliable and dangerous. He sent messages through relatives. Some vanished. At least one reached your mother. You ask how he can possibly know that. Because she answered. That hurts in a new way. Your mother knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to know that the story she told you, your father simply choosing another life and abandoning you, was not true. Hoy explains that Thu eventually sent a message saying continued contact might put both households at risk. You become furious with him anyway. He could have tried harder. Yes, he says. Your mother could have told you the truth. Yes. He doesn't defend himself. He doesn't defend her either. He looks toward the battle and says that decades of people refusing to bend have brought the country here. Your unit has to move. You tell him to come with you. He won't. Han is wounded and cannot simply be dragged through the fighting. You insist you can get both of them out. But out to where? North? South? Across whose lines? Through whose artillery? For the first time in your life, the family is close enough to reunite. And there is still no way to put it back together. You leave again. Later, Tet becomes difficult to explain. From where you stood, it felt catastrophic. Communist forces suffered enormous losses. The South Vietnamese government did not collapse. The expected mass uprising did not happen. Your platoon started with 42 men. After Hue, only 17 answer roll call. Then you hear official broadcasts using the language of success and victory. You hate hearing it. But history is rarely satisfied with one interpretation. News from the United States begins filtering through. Tet has badly shaken American public confidence. It deepens skepticism toward repeated claims that victory is close. President Lyndon Johnson later limits bombing and announces that he will not seek another term. Negotiations begin in Paris. So what does that actually mean? A battle that looked like failure from the street where you fought it still produced enormous political and strategic consequences far beyond Hue. Phuc tries to summarize the contradiction. Maybe, he says, you lost enough to gain something. You tell him never to say that where dead men can hear him. He doesn't say it again. Months later, shrapnel and illness finally send you north. Hanoi looks almost exactly as you remember it. Your mother does not. Before Thu can even embrace you, you ask whether your father ever wrote to her. She freezes. You already know the answer. You tell her you've seen Han. Then you say your father's name. Thu sits down. The full story comes out slowly. Back in 1954, she really did believe the separation would be short. She expected your father to follow. When he didn't, fear turned into anger. Then anger became something harder to admit, shame. Eventually, one of his messages reached her. He wanted contact. But by then, she had already spent years telling you he had chosen the South. You ask why she kept making him the villain. She says she was trying to make a life she could survive. You tell her that is not the same thing as telling the truth. For once, she doesn't argue. Then she asks about Han. Alive, you say. Relief floods her face. And then you add the rest. You shot her. Thu stares at you as though you've switched languages. When you explain what happened, she walks into the kitchen and vomits. Somehow, that hurts more than if she had screamed. Han recovers, but not completely. The damage leaves her right arm permanently weaker. Months later, a message from her reaches you through relatives. There is no grand reconciliation inside it. No speech about forgiveness. Just a dry warning. If you ever come to see her again, perhaps knock first. It is the first time you laugh since Hue. The war keeps going. Because of your ability to draw routes and read terrain, your work gradually shifts toward reconnaissance and logistics. You're still close to combat, but much of your war now happens through movement. Convoys, replacement troops, hidden storage sites, supply routes, road repairs. The expanding network carrying men and equipment south. By 1972, the fighting changes again. North Vietnam launches a major conventional offensive. This is no longer only the image many outsiders associate with the conflict. Small units moving through jungle and villages. Now there are tanks, heavy artillery, large formations, armies trying to break other armies. The offensive gains territory, but it does not cause the rapid collapse its planners hoped for. American air power remains devastating. Again, the neat categories fail. Success and failure occupy the same battlefield. Then, in December 1972, heavy American bombing hits Hanoi and Haiphong during the final stage of peace negotiations. You are back in Hanoi when the sirens begin. Bao dies when a building near his home collapses. There is nothing cinematic about it. No last conversation. No treasured object handed to you. No perfect final lesson. You learn he is dead because his name appears on a list, and immediately you remember the old projection booth. Bao feeding film into the machine. Bao warning young men that enemies almost never behave as simply as people imagine they will. In January 1973, the Paris Peace Accords are signed. American forces withdraw. North Vietnamese troops already in the south remain there. The agreement does not bring lasting peace between Vietnamese forces. The fighting continues. Phuc reads the news and says the foreign part of the war may finally be ending. You ask him which foreign part he means. He laughs. By 1974, another message arrives from Han. Your father is still alive. Her arm has improved, but it will never fully recover. She says nothing about whether she blames you. Then comes 1975. Everything accelerates. North Vietnamese forces attack through the Central Highlands. South Vietnamese withdrawals become chaotic. Hue falls in March. Da Nang follows. You move south with regular forces. The roads are packed with people traveling in opposite directions. Soldiers, families, children, vehicles, people carrying whatever they manage to save. Everyone seems convinced that safety exists somewhere farther down the road. You have spent half your life imagining reunification. You thought it would look like a national dream finally becoming real. Instead, it looks like abandoned trucks, dropped uniforms, exhausted parents, and children sleeping beside roads. By April, North Vietnamese forces are closing on Saigon. On April 30th, 1975, South Vietnam collapses. The men around you celebrate. You celebrate too. You believed in reunification. You fought for it. You survived long enough to see it happen. But victory does not restore Han's arm. It doesn't give back Baozo. It doesn't return the men missing from your platoon. It doesn't make your mother completely right. It doesn't make your father completely right. And it certainly doesn't return any of you to 1954. Months later, the 4 members of your family finally sit in the same room. For the first time in 21 years, Thu has come south. Your father is still living in the house where Han grew up. Nobody knows where to sit. Nobody knows what a family reunion is supposed to look like after 2 decades, 1 partition, several armies, countless lies, and one extremely unfortunate rifle shot. Your mother looks at your father. She says she expected him to come after her. He tells her he expected her to wait. 21 years of anger fit inside those two misunderstandings. You expect them to embrace. They don't. Part of you still believes survival should earn people some kind of reward. That after everything, your parents should become husband and wife again simply because they made it to the same room. Life does not work that way. Your father says too much time is gone. Pretending the old marriage still exists would only create another lie. Thu understands. They forgive some things. Not everything. Han looks at you and raises her damaged arm as far as it will go. This, she reminds you, hasn't disappeared either. You tell her you know. She corrects you. Knowing something happened and remembering it are not the same. Eventually, you ask the question you've been avoiding. Does she forgive you? She takes so long to answer that you wish you had stayed quiet. Finally, she says she knows you didn't realize who she was when you fired. You point out that this still isn't an answer. A slight smile appears. Exactly, she says. Now you're learning. The years move on. You never really return to your old life in traveling cinema. But the hand that painted movie posters finds other work. Plans, signs, technical drawings, diagrams. You still watch films sometimes, and you always notice the edits. A sudden jump, a missing beat. A moment somebody decided the audience didn't need. History works that way too. People compress wars into sentences. The Gulf of Tonkin, Rolling Thunder, Tet, Paris, reunification. Those words matter, but none of them contains your sister bleeding on a floor because you mistook a moving shape for an enemy. None contains your mother admitting she spent years repeating a version of the family story that protected her from her own shame. None contains your parents meeting after 21 years and deciding that surviving the same history did not require them to restore their marriage. None contains Phuc coming home to the daughter whose photograph he carried south. He survives the war. By the time he reaches her, she is 11 years old. She hides behind her grandmother. To her, this man who has spent years thinking about her is a stranger. Later, Phuc tells you about it. He stayed alive for his daughter. Then he came home and had to be introduced to her. You ask when she finally called him father. He shrugs. He'll tell you when it happens. Nobody includes that kind of wound in casualty numbers. You begin visiting Han regularly. Her right arm gets stronger, but never fully recovers. She adjusts. She continues medical work and eventually trains younger assistants. One afternoon, you watch her teaching a young woman how to tie a bandage. Han does most of the work with her stronger hand, using the injured one mainly for support. You offer to help. Without looking up, she tells you that you've already contributed quite enough to her medical education. The young trainee looks horrified. Han bursts out laughing. So do you. And that's how forgiveness finally reaches the two of you. Not through a grand speech. Not through a dramatic embrace. Through a joke so dark that only you and your sister have earned the right to make it. Things with Thu take longer. You love your mother. You also know love does not erase what she did. Eventually, she asks whether you believe she destroyed the family. You think about it for a long time. Then, you tell her no. She made one choice. After that, everyone else had to live inside the consequences. She cries. You do not tell her everything is fine, because it isn't. You simply hold her hand. Your father never moves north. Your mother never settles permanently in the south. They begin writing from time to time. The marriage does not come back. Something else does. A relationship built after the old one is already gone. Years later, people ask you what the Vietnam War looked like from your side. Usually, they expect a clean answer. National liberation, communism, American intervention, bombing, reunification. Those were all real parts of your experience. But so were malaria, exhaustion, fear, Propaganda, supply shortages, civilians trapped between forces, friends who disappeared, and commanders calling operations successful when the men who fought them could only remember how many people did not come back. You never stopped believing Vietnam had the right to decide its own future, without foreign armies determining the outcome. But you learned something else too. Believing deeply in a cause does not automatically make every choice made for that cause correct. You learn that lesson most clearly in Hue. For years, you think the worst moment of your life was realizing you had shot Han. Eventually, you understand that it wasn't. The worst moment came just before you pulled the trigger. Because in that instant, you were certain. You saw a figure. You knew the direction danger had come from. You were inside a war. And your mind filled in everything you couldn't actually see. Decades later, you walk into a small cinema in Hanoi. Halfway through the movie, the projector jams. The audience groans. The lights come on. A young technician apologizes and begins working on the machine. Loose film hangs from the projector. And suddenly you are 18 again. Bao is beside you. A damaged reel is stretched between his hands. You can almost hear him explaining that repairing film does not erase the break. Cut something out, reconnect the pieces, and the movie may continue. But the cut is still there. The story carries it forward. The technician fixes the projector. The room goes dark again. The movie resumes. You stay in your seat. And you think about your mother who left, your father who stayed, your sister who survived your bullet, your friend who came home to a daughter who did not know him, Bao, who never got a final scene, and a war that eventually brought the country back under one government without restoring any of you to the people you had been before the fighting began. When you were young, reunification sounded simple. Two separated parts brought back together. One country again. One whole. But families teach you what maps cannot. Sometimes two halves really do come together again. That doesn't mean the damage disappears. The seam may always show. The missing pieces may stay missing. And maybe the goal was never to pretend the break didn't happen. Maybe the most truthful version of the story is the one that lets you see exactly where it did.